Randall Brent Woodfield is an American serial killer, serial heiress, kidnapper, robber, burglar, and former football player who was dubbed the I-5 Killer or the I-5 Bandit by the media due to the crimes he committed along the Interstate 5 corridor running through Washington, Oregon, and California. Before his capture, he was suspected in multiple essays and murders. Though convicted of only one murder, he's been linked to a total of 18 murders and is suspected of having killed up to as many as 44 people. A native of Oregon, he was the third child of a prominent Newport family. He began to exhibit abnormal behaviours during his teenage years and was arrested for indecent exposure while still in high school. He played as a wide receiver for the Portland State Vikings and was drafted by the National Football League in 1974. An athlete for much of his life to play for the Green Bay Packers, but was cut from the team during training after a series of indecent exposure arrests. In 1975, he began a string of robberies and SAs on women in Portland, which he committed at knife point. Between 1980 and 81, he committed multiple murders in the cities along the I-5 corridor. His earliest documented murder was that of Sherry Ayers, a former classmate whom he had known since childhood, in October 1980. After committing numerous violent crimes, he was arrested in March 1981 and convicted in June of the murder of Shari Hull and attempted murder of her co-worker Beth Wilmot. He was sentenced to life imprisonment plus 90 years. He has never confessed to any of the crimes of which he has been accused or convicted. Though he's only been convicted of one murder and one attempted murder, he has been linked via DNA to other methods of numerous unsolved homicides in the ensuing decades. Authorities have estimated his total number of killings to be as many as 44. CBS News named him one of the deadliest serial killers in American history. He is currently incarcerated at the Oregon State Penitentiary. Randall Woodfield was born on the 26th of December 1950 in Salem, Oregon, the third child of an upper-middle-class family. His mother was a homemaker and his father was an executive at Pacific Northwest Bell. He has two older sisters, one of whom became a doctor and the other an attorney. The Woodfield family was said to have been well known and respected in their community. Woodfield was raised in Otter Rock, Oregon, a small seaside town approximately 8 miles north of Newport. Popular among his peers, he was a football star at Newport High School. Though his childhood was by all accounts stable, he began to exhibit sexually dysfunctional behaviours during junior high school, particularly exposing himself in public. While in high school, he exposed himself to a group of teenage girls on Yaquina Bay Bridge and was arrested. His football coaches helped conceal the incident to prevent him from being ousted from the team, though his parents forced him to attend therapy after the incident. After graduating from high school, his criminal record was expunged and he attended Treasure Valley Community College in Ontario, Oregon, later transferring to Portland State University in Portland in 1970, where he played for the Portland State Vikings as a wide receiver. At Portland State, he was active in Campus Crusade for Christ, an evangelical Christian student group, and lived in an apartment located on the South Park blocks. Gary Hambler, Woodfield's football coach, recalled, "Other teammates and peers of Woodfield recalled him as soft-spoken and kind of a loner who didn't have a lot of friends but noted his athleticism. Despite thriving in college, he was arrested on several occasions for petty crimes, first in 1974, vandalising the apartment of his ex-girlfriend, and later in 1972 for public indecency in Vancouver, Washington. In 1973, he was arrested again for public indecency in Multnomah County, Oregon. He chose to drop out of college 3 semesters shy of graduating, and he was selected as a wide receiver in the 1974 NFL Draft by the Green Bay Packers in the 17th round, 428th pick. He tried to establish himself within the Packers during coach and general manager Dan Devine's last season, but he couldn't shake his problems with a trip across the country. He signed a contract in February 1974 and was cut during training camp, failing to make the team's final roster. After being cut by the Packers, he played for the 1974 season with semi-pro Manitowoc Chiefs and worked for Oshkosh Truck. He left Wisconsin in late 1974 and returned to Portland feeling disgraced by his failure to maintain his football career. In early 1975, several Portland women were accosted by a knife-wielding man, forced to perform oral S, and then robbed of their handbags. Law enforcement responded to the string of crimes by having female police officers act as decoys. On the 3rd of March 1975, Woodfield was arrested after being caught with marked money from one of the undercover officers. Upon interrogation, he confessed to the crimes, blaming poor actual impulse control, which he claimed was a result of his use of steroids. In April 1975, he pled guilty to reduced charges of second-degree robbery. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but was freed on parole in July 1979 after only having served 4 years. On the 9th of October 1980, Sherry Lynn Ayers, an X-ray technician and former classmate of Woodfield, was aired and murdered in her apartment in SW 9th Place in downtown Portland. Her body was discovered on the 11th of October by her fiancé. She had been bludgeoned and stabbed repeatedly in the neck. Ayers, a University of Oregon graduate, had known Woodfield since 2nd grade, having attended the same schools in Newport. During Woodfield's prior 4-year imprisonment, he and Ayers had responded via letters. Suspecting Woodfield's involvement in Sherry Lynn's murder, the Ayers family provided his name to law enforcement. He was questioned but refused to sit for a polygraph test. Homicide detectives found his answers generally evasive and deceptive, but because his blood type didn't match the semen found in her body, no charges were filed. 1 month later, on the morning of the 27th of November, Thanksgiving Day, Woodfield arrived in the North Portland home of Darcy Renee Fix, 22, planning to assault her. He had known Fix during college as an ex-girlfriend of one of his close friends. Douglas Keith Altig, 24, was at Fix's home when Woodfield arrived. Both Fix and Altig were subsequently bound and shot to death execution style in the home, and Fix's .32 caliber revolver was missing from the scene. Due to his acquaintance with Fix, Woodfield was questioned about the murders, but law enforcement found no concrete evidence pointing to his involvement. These are various composites of Woodfield during his robberies in late 1980 and early 1981. After committing the murders of Fix and Altig, Woodfield began a series of robberies throughout the Pacific Northwest. On the 9th of December 1980, Woodfield, wearing a fake beard, held up a Vancouver, Washington gas station at gunpoint. In Eugene, Oregon, 4 nights later, on the 13th of December, he raided an ice cream parlor. On the 14th of December, he robbed a drive-in restaurant in Albany, Oregon. During one of the robberies, Woodfield wore what appeared to be a band-aid or tape across the bridge of his nose, similar to nasal strips worn by football players. On the 21st of December, Woodfield, again wearing a false beard, accosted a waitress in Seattle, taping her to a restaurant bathroom and forcing her at gunpoint to masturbate him. By January 1981, law enforcement had dubbed the robber the I-5 Bandit, given his apparent preference for committing crimes along the Interstate 5 corridor. On the 8th of January, he held up the same Vancouver gas station he had robbed in December, this time forcing the female attendant to expose her breasts after he emptied the cash register. 3 days later, on the 11th of January, he robbed a market in Eugene. The next day, on the 12th of January, he shot and wounded a female grocery clerk in a store in Sutherland, Oregon. On the 14th of January, a man matching the description of the I-5 Bandit was wearing a false beard, invading a home occupied by 2 sisters aged 8 and 10. He ordered the 2 girls to undress and essayed them. 4 days later in Salem, a man matching the same description entered an office building and essayed 2 women, Sherry Hull and Beth Wilmer, after which he killed Hull and wounded Wilmer, leaving her for dead. On the 26th and 29th of January, he travelled to southern Oregon and committed robberies in Eugene, Medford, and Grants Pass. In the latter location, 2 females, a clerk and customer, were assaulted by the robber. On the 3rd of February 1981, the bodies of Donna Eckert, 37, and a 14-year-old daughter, Janelle Charlotte Jarvis, were found together in a bed in their home in Mountain Gate, California, north of Redding. Each had been shot several times in the head. Forensic tests showed that the girl had also been essayed. The same day in Redding, a female store clerk was kidnapped and aired in a holdup. An identical crime was reported in Eureka, California on the 4th of February, with the same man robbing the Ashland, Oregon motel that night. Then on the 9th of February in Corvallis, a man matching the I-5 Bandit's description held up a fabric store and molested the girl and a customer before he left. 3 days later, robberies committed by a man matching the I-5 Bandit's description occurred in Vancouver, Olympia, and Bellevue, Washington. The Olympia and Bellevue incidents included 3 essays. Upon an impending visit to Portland, Woodfield planned a Valentine's Day party at the city's downtown Marriott Hotel, inviting friends and acquaintances from college. After no guests came, Woodfield drove to the Beaverton home of 18-year-old Julie Reitz, whom he had met while working as a bouncer at the Fawcett, a bar in Portland. He arrived at her home around 2 a.m. on the 15th of February. Around 4 a.m. he aired and then shot her in the head, killing her. Police investigating the scene determined that Reitz had a glass of wine with her attacker and had also begun to prepare coffee. A package of instant coffee was discovered on the kitchen counter, and water in the kettle had been left to completely boil away. By the 28th of February, the investigation was now focused on Woodfield, but then the I-5 Bandit had struck 3 more times in Eugene on the 18th and 21st of February, and with another essay in Corvallis on the 25th of February. Detectives in Marion County assembled a call log showing Woodfield had placed calls via calling cards at payphones near the murder sites around the time they were committed. On the 5th of March 1981, Woodfield was brought into the Salem Police Department for an interrogation after Lisa Garcia positively identified him in a photo lineup. His apartment in Springfield, Oregon was subsequently searched 2 days later by a warrant. Inside, law enforcement discovered a spent .32 shell casing inside a racquetball bag, as well as a roll of tape that matched the tape found on the victims. On the 7th of March, he was taken into custody after being positively identified by several Oregon robbery victims. On the 16th of March, indictments for murder, sodomy, attempted kidnapping, armed robbery, and illegal possession of firearms were initiated from various jurisdictions in Washington and Oregon. In the summer of 1981, Woodfield was tried in Salem for the murder of Hull, as well as charges for sodomy and attempted murder of Wilmot. Wilmot testified against him at the trial and was a key in the prosecution's conviction. Chris Van Dyke, son of actor Dick Van Dyke, was the Marion County District Attorney at the time and prosecuted the case. Van Dyke would later characterize Woodfield as the coldest, most detached defendant I've ever seen. On the 26th of June 1981, after 3.5 hours of deliberation, Woodfield was convicted on all counts and sentenced to life in prison plus 90 years. In October 1981, a second trial was held in Benson County, Oregon, in which Woodfield received sodomy and weapons charges tied to one of the attacks in a restaurant bathroom. Prior to his trial, his counsel attempted to move the trial from the Willamette Valley. He felt that, owing to the publicity the case received, Woodfield would not get a fair trial there. The judge in the case denied counsel's request, along with a request to hypnotize a prosecution witness in an effort to determine if the witness had been influenced by the media coverage. Woodfield was convicted by the jury and had an additional 35 years added to his already instated sentence. Despite the apparent links with countless other crimes and homicides, Woodfield would not be prosecuted for the majority of the crimes he was believed to have committed. Unable to afford multiple trials, the state of Oregon was satisfied with Woodfield's existing life sentence. Woodfield is serving his sentence at the Oregon State Penitentiary in Salem. In October 1983, he was injured by a fellow inmate during a prison disturbance. In April 1987, he filed a $12 million libel suit against Ann Rule, the author who had written The I-5 Killer, an account of Woodfield's life and crime spree in 1984. The federal court in Oregon dismissed the lawsuit in January 1988, citing that the statute of limitations on such a lawsuit had expired. By 1990, after discovery of more victims, Woodfield was suspected in as many as 44 homicides. In 2001 and 2006, DNA testing linked Woodfield to 2 additional murders in Oregon that occurred from 1980 and 1981. During his time in the penitentiary, Woodfield has married 3 times and divorced twice. Some letters he wrote from prison were sold online as a collection titled The Serial Killer Letters and published by the Charles Press. In one of these letters, he wrote to journalist Jenna Furio, the majority of Woodfield's victims were thin white women in their 20s, many of middle-class backgrounds. A number of his victims, particularly in the instances for robbery and essay, were young employees of restaurants and convenience stores located along Interstate 5, which Woodfield traversed in his 1974 Champagne Edition gold Volkswagen Beetle. In some instances, Woodfield's attacks were undertaken entirely at random, while in others the murders were incited by rejected sexual advances. His level of acquaintance with the victims varied, some he knew personally, while others were just complete strangers. During his robberies, assaults, and killings, Woodfield typically concealed his identity by wearing a hoodie, a fake beard, and most curiously, a strip of athletic tape across his nose. Police believe Woodfield may have done this to obscure his features and prevent victims from identifying him in a police lineup. His victims were typically killed via gunshot, and the crimes were sexually motivated. Jim Lawrence, a detective from Portland's cold case unit, noted Woodfield's lack of remorse and responsibility in his crimes, saying, Lawrence also noted Woodfield's egotism during his early interrogations. Anne Rule, who documented Woodfield's crimes in the I-5 killer, suggested that rejection and feelings of inadequacy were factors that drove him to violence, particularly against women. She also characterised Woodfield as a smooth ladies' man whose good looks and disposition aided in his ability to trap victims. Unlike many serial killers whose killing patterns were characterised by intervals or cooling off periods, Woodfield's murders and other crimes escalated rapidly, increasing in successive frequency. Woodfield never confessed to any of the murders of which he's been convicted, accused, or which he has been linked to. Though convicted only in the murder of Sherry Hull, Woodfield has been linked to numerous other murders via DNA and other methods. Criminologists and detectives have provided estimated totals of numbers of killings ranging from 22 to as many as 44 unsolved homicides. Woodfield is also estimated to have committed at least 60 unsolved Rs. The following is a list of Woodfield's confirmed victims. 9th of October 1980, Sherilyn Ayers, 29, a former classmate of Woodfield's, was found in her Portland home on the 11th of October, was bludgeoned and stabbed multiple times in the neck. 27th of November, Darcy Rilling Fix, 22, and Douglas Keith Altig, 24, both found shot to death with a .32 revolver in Fix's North Portland home. 21st of December, a named woman, 25, assaulted at gunpoint in a Seattle restroom, forced to masturbate Woodfield, survived. 12th of January 1981, Susie Bennett, 20, a market clerk in Sutherland, Oregon, shot by Woodfield during a robbery, survived. 18th of January, Sherry Lynn Hull, 20, and Beth Wilmot, 20, employees at the Transamerica office in Kaiser, Oregon, accosted by Woodfield during their evening work shift, essayed both women before shooting them both in the head. Hull died of her injuries, Wilmot survived. 3rd of February, a named woman, 18, kidnapped at gunpoint and ad near Redding, California in the morning hours, survived. Donnelly Eckert, 37, and her daughter Janelle Charlotte Jarvis, 14, both found essayed and shot to death in their Shasta County home. 4th of February, a named woman, kidnapped and ad in Eureka, California, survived. 15th of February, Julie Ann Reeds, 18, ad and shot to death in her Beaverton, Oregon home at around 4 a.m, was an acquaintance of Woodfield's throughout his job as a bartender. Retracing Woodfield's movements along Interstate 5, law enforcement have identified at least 25 other potential murders, while other estimations suggest up to 44. Notable is Martha Morrison, 17, who disappeared in Eugene in September 1974 and was found murdered the following month near Vancouver. Her remains were unidentified until 2015. Both Woodfield and Ted Bundy have been considered suspects in her murder. However, after Morrison's case was identified, law enforcement reached out to the public in an effort to encourage people to come forward with tips. In August 2017, a bloodstain on a pistol owned by a long-time suspect, Warren Forrest, was matched to Morrison through DNA testing. During the spring of 1980, Marsha Wheater, 19, and Kathy Allen, 18, vanished while hitchhiking from Spokane, Washington, area of their hometown to Fairbanks, Alaska. Their bodies were found in May 1981, covered by several inches of ash from the 18th of May 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. Suspected serial killer Martin Lee Sanders was later convicted of their murders, but as of 2018, the case remains unsolved.